The views expressed on this show by guests and the host on issues outside of the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence are the opinions of those individuals alone and do not necessarily reflect those of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. This is going to be a good one because I had this guy on the show a lot back when we were doing the audio podcast. Now it's video. You're finally going to get to see him. A lot of interesting things to say. I swear, I don't even have to do my job when I'm here on this program when he's here because he can talk for a very long time. I'm hanging on every single one of his words. He ought to do his own show. I've told him to do that before, but he hasn't. But I'm hoping maybe sometime we can convince him. But this is John O'Malley, and he's a career government federal employee. He's now retired after more than a third of a century in government service he spent. He worked for the Department of the Air Force, Agriculture, EPA, the Bureau of the Census, the Department of the Army, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the Food and Drug Administration. He spent the majority of his career in science and engineering, which included aerospace, turbine engines, operations research, statistics, chemistry, relational databases, and drug evaluations. So he knows a lot about a lot of stuff. He's been a candidate for office, and he's been a tireless activist for 9/11 Truth, working in so many different areas. He focuses a lot on political outreach, which we're going to be talking about today. So let's go ahead and bring him in. John, welcome back to 9/11 Freefall.
Well, thank you. How you doing?
Thank you for coming on. I'll tell you what, a lot of people write to me and they say, we need to have John O'Malley back. And we haven't in a few years. We haven't had you on the video show yet because we've just been busy doing other things. But this is a great opportunity. And it used to be a tradition every year to bring you back on Freefall to talk about CPAC, your consistent outreach with that event every single year. I don't think we did it last year, but we're bringing the tradition back. So please first elaborate on that background if you want to. Otherwise, let's just talk about CPAC. Explain to the audience what that is. Why do you go there every year?
Well, I grew up in D.C., which is a company town. And if I had grown up in Detroit, I'd probably work for GM or Ford. And if a lot of what you do depends on where you grow up. Because if you grow up in a company town, you either work for the company or you don't work. So I spent more than a third of a century working for the federal government. And after I retired, when I found out about Building 7, psychologically, it was like being hit with a ton of bricks. Because I had actually worked in the southwest part of the Pentagon when I worked in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And so I became involved with as a volunteer for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, which is really the preeminent truth organization in America. And not only do those of us who have taken an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, need to protect the Constitution, but every American citizen needs to, because the Constitution is being attacked in a way that it has never been attacked in history. The Bill of Rights is under attack. If we lose the Bill of Rights, we are toast. All of the legislation that resulted from the lies of 9/11 are attacking the Bill of Rights, and they're still doing it. The TSA is an attack on the Bill of Rights. Homeland Security, NSA spying on Americans. I mean, the list goes on and on. All of these bills that were passed and signed were based on a lie, one of the biggest lies in history. So those of us yourself, me, and many others are trying to save the country from the people whose obvious intent is to destroy America, and we don't want to let that happen. Now, what they want us to do, they want us to just go away and forget about it. That is the worst thing we could do. One of the issues we have to deal with is that because it's been more than 20 years now, 9/11 does not have the immediacy that it had 20 years ago. But in spite of that, we have to remind people that the legislation attacking their Bill of Rights is still on the books, still being enforced every day. So this is something, not only do we have to do something about it, we have to encourage many others. Now, because when I joined Architects and Engineers, they asked me what team, and I said, well, I'll be on the congressional research team, because I literally live close enough to drive down, in 45 minutes to drive to the Capitol building and, give things to these members of Congress, which I've done. Hasn't turned out to be as effective as I hoped it would be. So what we found is when you wake people up by presenting the evidence, part of it depends on who do you wake up. If you wake up people who do nothing, which a lot of people do, they just sit home and watch TV, that is not worth as much as waking up people who are active. There is what I would call the political 1%. It's about 3 million people, give or take, that are spread over the roughly 3,000 political districts throughout the US. They volunteer in campaigns. They run for office. They donate. They raise money. They go door knocking. They do all the things you have to do to win political races. These people are active. They are not the kind of people who just sit home and watch TV. They go out and do things, especially the ones who run for office. Now, when I ran for office, one of the things you learn running for office is you learn the other candidates. You go to forums with them, you eat lunch with them, you talk to them, you get to know them on a first name basis. These people tend to be very successful. They have very successful, before they run for office, very often, they have very successful careers. They have advanced academic degrees. They are very affluent. When you go to these people's houses and you look at their houses, you say, like, wow, like these are high net worth people who could donate several $1,000s to Architects and Engineers. And for them, it would be small change. That's one of the reasons I've done this. How successful I've been in raising money for Architects and Engineers, I have no idea, but it's something I do. So the question is, how do you wake up these people? Because I've talked to them. A lot of these people, very intelligent, highly educated. They live in nice houses, and they have all the signs of success. They have never heard of Building 7. They have no idea what I'm talking about when I try to talk to them about this. They read the Washington Post and think they're getting the complete news. It's really sad. So there are several ways to wake them up. I think we need to remember that when I use the term waking them up, as I was woken up many years ago, it was the evidence that woke me up. So we need to give them the evidence, and then the evidence will wake them up. Like the video, when you see the video of Building 7, you know something's not right, something's wrong. The fact that they have censored any mention of Building 7 out of radio, TV, magazines, newspapers, movies, political speech, shows you the enormity of the control system. So this is what we have to break through. So this is what we've tried to do because we live in the DC area. You can actually go down to Capitol Hill and you can see these people walking around, like people that you see on TV. They're just walking down the sidewalk. Same thing at CPAC. We've gone to CPAC. Now, CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Conference that is this year. It's being held in Washington, D.C. It's on a conference center that's on the Potomac River between Washington, D.C. and Maryland and Virginia, and not that far from Delaware. The reason I say that, if you live in these areas, Maryland, Virginia, D.C., Delaware, you are within driving distance. And you could go there and just go and walk up to these people who you see on TV. They're just normal people. They're not very impressive. They're just like the kind of people you would see at the mall. And some of them do not even seem to be that smart, to be honest with you, when you meet them. You can go on the A&E website and download brochures, print them out, or you can go to the A&E store on the A&E website and you can buy, like what we've done. We've gone to the A&E store and bought boxes of DVDs. This is back when people were using more DVDs than they are now. One thing that we found to work is there's a video called Experts Speak Out. We found that to be pretty successful. And one of the reasons is it does not present conclusions. It presents evidence. One of the problems you run into is when you give someone a conclusion without first giving them the evidence to support it. And if that conclusion to them seems crazy, they will not stay around to see the evidence. So there is some value in just presenting the evidence and trying to awaken their curiosity. And some of them, once their curiosity is awake, then they will go and they will search out, the evidence, and then they will be hit with a ton of bricks. Like, oh my God, how could this have happened? And how could we be lied to by everybody in the news media? It is difficult to believe when you first see it. So now this year is 2023. Next year is a presidential election year. It's also all members of Congress will be up for re-election, about a third of the Senate, and many governors and state legislatures will be up for re-election. So one thing you can do, well, you can go to CPAC, like the people who are within driving distance. If you are a student, I think it's only $50. And they used to have a senior citizen discount, which I would qualify for. Whether they will have that this year again, I don't know. It's going to be in March, early March, like the first week of March. I think March 1st through March 4th or something. And some of you may have seen it on C-SPAN. Every year it's on TV. The candidates who are running for office. Now, when you go to CPAC, if you go there physically, there's the big room where everybody gives their speeches. But below that, there's a room with a lot of tables with all of these political organizations that you would expect that would be at a Republican-leaning conference. The right to life people, the traditional marriage people, their Second Amendment, there's all these little organizations that you've never heard of. And each of them has a table. All of these people are politically active. In order to go to CPAC as a regular attendee, and when I was there, I was talking to this guy. He was he owned an auto dealership in the Midwest, and he and I were talking about what it takes to get here. I mean, me, I just have to drive because I'm local. But he came. He had to get a plane ticket, hotel, maybe a rental car. It adds up. So the fact that these people are willing to spend this money tells you that not only are they politically active, they are extremely politically active. So these are the people that we want to wake up. So if you go online, what we're really doing is we are in the sales business. When we go to these places, we are giving people a sales pitch. We are it's a sales presentation. And if you go online and you can get all the information about what is the proper way to make a sales pitch. I've studied. First thing, you want to establish rapport. You kind of butter them up. And anyone who's, bought a car or bought life insurance or bought a washing machine and interacted with people who work in sales, you've seen this being done to you. It's not rocket science. You establish rapport. You because Republicans usually have business cards, you always want to get their business card because that gives you an email address that then you can send a nice note with the YouTube link for Experts Speak Out or whatever you want to do, so you can communicate with them later. You also want to give them something physical. This is why salesmen always give samples. That's one of the reasons to bring brochures from A&E. Because if you give them something physical, like a little brochure, it makes it less likely that they will forget about you. So that these are all things that you can go online, go on YouTube and do a search on the proper way to make a sales presentation, because we're actually selling an idea. We're selling the truth. We're just not making a commission. Anyway, so this is what you can do at CPAC. And I've gone there. I just go in the big room where they have maybe 100 organizations. Each has a table. And I'll just sequentially go down, each row, spend maybe 5-15 minutes at each one, and hopefully give them the wherewithal to become awake. Now, some are already awake. Don't waste your time with them, okay? Because now you're preaching to the choir. Some are hopelessly unable to be awake. Don't waste your time with them because they're hopeless. And sometimes this is really not easy to detect. But then there's a group in the middle who are at least willing to listen. And some of them may have been told things by people that they respect, like if they have a nephew who's in graduate school for mechanical engineering or civil engineering or something, who tells them this stuff. That nephew may have awakened their curiosity. So they're at least willing to look at the evidence. And they're politically active because that's why they're there. So that is what we do. Now, if you want to get a table there, it's like several $1,000s, which for many people is prohibitive. But you don't have to get a table. All you have to do is you just walk in. I think the student was $50, and they used to have a senior citizens discount. Now the regular is like, I think $295, which, is something, but it's, we remember this is your country at stake. Your country is at stake. So that's kind of what we can do at CPAC. And also when you do go to CPAC, you can learn things about politics. Now, as much as I have a disdain for politicians and politics, we have to get political, because if there ever is something that we want to happen, for example, if there is a vote in Congress to overturn the Patriot Act or disband Homeland Security, that's going to be done by a congressional committee run by people who were elected through the political process. If there ever is a reinvestigation of 9/11 by the federal government, that will come out of a congressional committee vote that will be done by people who are elected. So we have to be involved in politics whether we like it or not. There's a famous quotation from, I think it's Plato, that those who fail to become involved in the governance system of our country will be governed and controlled by their inferiors. And I think a lot of that is happening. So we have to do these things. You have to become politically involved given with your abilities. And I mean, some people can't. I mean, if you got, working at a job and you got, children and not everyone has the same ability. Like many of the people in our group are retired people because we have the time. We are not working 40 to 60 hours a week at some job doing whatever. So that's kind of a sort of a nutshell on CPAC. Now, sometimes what you'll notice at CPAC, what you will see is completely different from what the crooks who run the news media are telling us. For example, during the 2016 election, the run-up, we were told that Jeb Bush was the front runner in the Republican Party. And when you go to CPAC, you see all these volunteers who wear the shirts. Like, for example, the Rand Paul volunteers were wearing Rand Paul shirts. The Ben Carson volunteers were wearing Ben Carson shirts. And Ben Carson was local. He's a Baltimore guy, so he had a lot of volunteers. I didn't see one Jeb Bush shirt. Like, no one was supporting Jeb Bush. And in that election, that part of the CPAC election thing, Jeb Bush, who was connected to the family that was connected to 9/11, the Bush family, he was booed. And people walked out when it came his turn to speak. Now, Republicans tend to be very polite people. How often do you hear about a bunch of Republicans having a riot? So very unusual for Republicans to do something like that. So that tells you we have had some success.
Well, now, and also too, that's not. I just want to interject too. That also too, that's not how that election turned out, because that's what you were hearing was that Jeb Bush was going to be the front runner, to the point where I thought that's what it was going to be, whether you like it or not. But that's not what ended up happening. And I just want to reiterate for the audience here too, is that for 9/11 outreach, because we're apolitical at 9/11 Truth. If you are on the left and you want to go to CPAC and talk about 9/11, I'm not encouraging people to go in there and crash it and add to the divisiveness. But you want to reach out about 9/11, you can participate in that action, or you can go to events like the Left Forum too. So I just want to make sure the audience understands that, because we're talking about science. We're talking about evidence of a crime, a major crime that has been covered up for 20 years here. And so while John's doing it at CPAC, let's say that you don't like any of this cast of characters that he's talking about out there, because you're a diehard person on the left. You can do this at your own forums as well, with the same techniques, same strategy, and put that out. And I'd also just want to say, just to clear it up, CPAC is going to be on March 1st to March 4th of this year. So we have some clarity on when the date is. And I'm sure if people want to have some questions or want to participate in the 9/11 activism, John can help them out. So please continue, John.
Yeah, you can go on the web and do a search on CPAC and get all the information. And also, did you mention the Left Forum? Is that another thing people can go to?
I think I did, yeah. That's a thing. I assume that's still going on. And we used to have a presence there. And, the thing is that I think we should be doing outreach to both sides of the political aisle. I mean, it's impossible to live in the modern day and not have an opinion one way or the other on that. I think I do a pretty good job of disguising mine here on the show. because it's a divisive thing, and we should be just focusing on the evidence. But if you have the wherewithal to go to the Left Forum or go to CPAC or crossbreed here and just focus on the 9/11 activism and not picking fights with people at these things over the political stuff, then you should attend. Everyone should be attending these and handing this information out. Another outreach thing, I have not tried this yet, but there are projectors, I guess, you can buy to put on your phone. So let's say you have a video of Building 7 coming down, you can shine it on the wall like we're in Star Trek or something, and you can actually show videos to people as you're talking about it. Please continue.
Yeah, and we've done that. Like, we've gone to these other organizations. Like, one of them is the Democratic Party Women's Committee, something or other, that they have a mansion in DC, and we've gone to their events and done the same thing. Basically walk up to people, initiate conversation, establish rapport, give them something physical, whether it's a DVD on Experts Speak Out or a brochure or whatever. And if at all possible, get their contact information, like their email address, and then follow up with a nice friendly email saying it was nice to talk to you and really respect your opinion. And, here's a YouTube link of Experts Speak Out or other things. I found the Experts Speak Out thing to be effective, but there are that's not the only one. There's one about, this is an orange. A lot of people have seen that. It's a common. That's pretty good. That has helped, and it's very short. It's only, I think it's like less than 2 minutes or something. So that we found that to be good. Now, because next year is going to be a presidential election year, the two places where you can get really up close and personal with the candidates are the New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucus. So this is kind of, if you live close enough to drive to these things, like like a neighboring state of New Hampshire or Iowa, you can go to these things, because in the New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucus, now they start this year, the latter part of this year, because the results of these two, sort of a primary, but they're really, it's not like the other primaries, will be in early 2024, but the campaigning in New Hampshire and Iowa will start, it'll start to get really active around September, October, November, that time frame. That's when these presidential candidates, now, they appear at diners, very small hotel rooms, the basements of churches, people's living rooms. And this is where you can walk right up to them and confront them. Now, you don't want to limit yourself to the candidates. The candidates are surrounded by volunteers, staffers. The incumbents all have staffers that, were volunteers who then became staffers after the candidates were elected. Advance men. You may have it. You may find it a little bit difficult to actually spend too much one-on-one time with the candidate because of these things. There's usually people around, but you can spend one-on-one time with their volunteers, their staffers, their advance men, whatever. And you can give them brochures, do your sales pitch. Now, if you are in Iowa, in the past, the Iowa news, I think it's called the Des Moines Register, in that the newspaper, they will publish a list of, like, what locations the candidates are going to be in, what days, whether it's a church basement or diner or whatever. The same thing is true in New Hampshire. There's various political groups in New Hampshire, but you have to do a little bit searching on the web to find out where these candidates are going to be. And you can also go to the candidates' website, but they're only going to tell you where that candidate's going to be. whereas these other websites will have some kind of continually updated list of where all the candidates are going to appear, because some of them, they appear together sometimes. Now, when you do this, one thing you want to remember is that these two primary caucus things is about the last time that you can really get close to the candidates, because as soon as Super Tuesday arrives, which is early in 2024, once that happens, you will never be able to get close to a candidate, hardly, or even their staffers again. Because what happens when they have the rallies, the candidate is whisked in, surrounded by their security detail. They zip over to the podium, they give their stump speech, and then their handlers, their security people or whatever, whisk them out and they disappear. So you cannot even get close to them. Once Super Tuesday, your chances are diminished. So that's why New Hampshire and Iowa are two of the great opportunities to perpetually insert 9/11 and Building 7 into the political process. And you can just do this, and sometimes you will have them look at you and they'll just lie to you, which is, politicians lie. It's not new. Or sometimes they will squirm, but sometimes the people around them, their staffers, we can get to them. And now, if you go on Wikipedia or any source like that and go down to all the members of Congress, all the senators, go through their resume, almost all of them started out as volunteers or staffers or running for, dog catcher or some low level before they made it up the food chain. So when you talk to a staffer or a volunteer or an advance man or whatever, you may be talking to a future candidate. You want to remember that. This is the way the system works. And this is the kind of thing you start to learn once you become politically active. And I never was. I mean, I was one of those people who just voted. That's all I did. It wasn't until after I woke up about 9/11, I said, oh my God. And then I became politically active. It's something anyone can do. It just takes time, which if you are a retired person or if you are someone who has some time, that's a decision you have to make for yourself. And so that's the system we have. And even if we do not get a complete investigation anytime soon, when we do, there's a term that's called cognitive infiltration. When we get the evidence and the ideas into people's heads, it will change how they make decisions in the future, maybe on different subjects. Like, do you trust your government to roll out a central bank digital currency that can control everything you do? Like, do you trust these people? Things like that. It will change things. The whole 9/11 thing really changes people's view of our government. So
yeah, I said that a lot too. And we have no idea what's going to happen in the next few years. Obviously, it's the future, but there could be another 9/11 next year for all we know, right? Maybe if you've influenced people by talking about the evidence now about 9/11, maybe that'll make people wiser in the aftermath of whatever next big thing happens, to make them look at it more closely, or even let's say it's even a legit story, what happened next. But maybe, though, you'll make them question whether they should sign on to some legislation that further erodes civil liberties and people's privacy and all of that, because everything you are saying is correct. It was a much different world pre 9/11 than it is post 9/11. So to me, it's the three-dimensional aspect of our activism. Yes, obviously we want a new investigation. We want a full recognition of what really happened that day. We want it in the history books. But even if that's going to take a while, or even if it never happens, we're still having an impact because you're putting those seeds in people's minds. They're starting to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't just blindly trust whatever that television tells me. Maybe I ought to look at things for myself more often, and maybe that will change the outcome of some future thing. You never know, but that's how you do it. That's how you impact the future. And sometimes you don't even get to see the results of your actions. Maybe you put it in somebody's head, and then later they do something in private. You never know about it. However, you had an impact. So you just got to have faith in the fact that you are making a difference. And it's a lot of fun, too. I've done this. I've reached out to candidates. I don't want to sound like a bully or anything, but I mean, it's just watch them sort of shrink these powerful people because they don't want anything to do with you when you're talking about this, but they can't just tell you to go to hell either. They got to deal with you. And I reached out to this Democratic candidate for Congress, sat through his entire speech, asked him about Building 7, says, I don't agree with your findings. And then afterwards, everyone's milling around him, and you could see he did not want to talk to me. He's trying to talk to every single last person before he gets to me. And then privately said, I appreciate your answer, but what specifically do you not agree with about the findings? And the first thing he said was, please don't do this to me. And
well, here's a little trick. If you want to go as a group, but don't sit together, spread out. If you sit in the front row and wear like a red shirt or a yellow shirt, and you raise your hand if they take questions from the floor, which sometimes they are increasingly afraid to do, you want to make it easy for them to call on you. Like, if you're in the front row with a red shirt, it's easy for the candidate to point and say, oh, the gentleman in the front row with the red shirt. And then you can stand up and ask your question, say about Building 7 or whatever. And then he'll brush you off. And then maybe he will ask a lady wearing the yellow dress in the front row, but many seats away from you, who's with you, but no one knows it. She'll stand up and said, I don't like the way you ignored that gentleman's question. I think you deserve an answer. Now what's he going to do? Now say he kind of brushes her off. So then there's a third question, and it may be down the line, and say another person says, I don't like the way you disrespected, the man in the white shirt and the lady in the yellow dress or whatever. Just a small number of people can create the impression that the whole room is interested in this issue. But remember, don't sit together, sit spread out. And it is an organized way of creating a disproportionate effect.
And something else to remember too, and I always thought this during the C-SPAN campaign when we had people calling into the show every morning, is that like people would say, oh, but none of these candidates are ever going to agree with you. We did get positive responses from and not candidates, but congressmen. I mean, none of these guests are going to agree with you. We did get some positive responses. Obviously, they didn't take anything or do anything with them when they went back to their office that day. But regardless, I didn't care about that at first. What I cared about was that audience, because when you watch these people brush this off or they give these horrible answers, the people at home are witnessing this. And then people on YouTube started making videos about it and giving commentary about this, like what is going on with our representatives in Congress. I mean, this shows exactly what the problem is right here. So you're not even doing it really for the benefit of that person. Right. You're doing it for the benefit of the people watching this who have no skin in this game and are just being entertained, but also thinking, oh my God, like, these people can't even answer a simple question or just even look at this. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, we are in essence bypassing the controlled press. This is the same controlled press that's been lying to us about everything for many years. And one of the things that happens when people wake up, they say, well, if they would lie to us about 9/11, what else are they lying to us about? It's like almost everything. So it really changes your the way you see the world.
Now, I'm going to be a negative Nancy here. I'm going to play devil's advocate because we got people out there, very nice people out in the movement, but they have an opinion, and their opinion is that, that's all well and good and everything, but why bother? They're also corrupt. Why do we even go to congressmen? We know what they're going to say. It doesn't matter. You might as well just stay home and watch reruns on television because Congress is never going to do anything about 9/11. What do you say to them, John?
I would say, well, the first thing, sometimes the people who say that say it out of a sense of fear. We did not become a free country by being a bunch of cowards, but through the process of cowardice, we can become an enslaved nation. And I can see that happening. We have to be effective. We have to be smart. We have to be targeted. And we cannot just sit back and let them roll over us. Now, I personally believe that we have been more effective than many of us realize. The candidate who won the 2016 presidential election implied before he was elected that he was a 9/11 truther. So that meant that for that candidate, for a certain part of the electorate, that was a winning issue. Now, that office holder then dropped the issue. And Ron Paul one time said, he didn't say this directly. It was an indirect, implied kind of thing, that someone had told him that if he didn't get too outside the envelope, that he would wind up like President Kennedy. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But this is the problem that we are dealing with a criminal element in the government that is very dangerous. And I think they're becoming afraid because too many people are waking up. If it was not important what we believe, they would not be spending so many resources trying to control what we believe. So they deeply care. I mean, if you were to add up all the airtime minutes that have been spent by the big media to lie to us about 9/11 and apply that to some, whatever the rate is for advertising, you spend so many $1,000s for like 1 minute, you're talking about an enormous amount of money. So they deeply care what we believe. For them, public opinion is something that they are terrified of if the public opinion gets wrong, because they may control what's left of the legacy media, but they know that they are outnumbered astronomically. And I think some of the things that they've been doing recently indicates that they are getting scared and even panicking. So we are being more effective than many of us know. I know in the past two presidential elections, and I know in the 16, I don't know about the 20, but the Green Party had 9/11 as part of their platform. And the Libertarian Party, which is really sort of partially a subset of the Republican Party, has had 9/11 on their party platform. So we have had success, and my opinion is that when they did the 9/11 operation, the senior people who they were, who knows, George Herbert Walker Bush, David Rockefeller, we'll never know. They were probably somewhat techno illiterate. They did not understand the effect of broadband. If it wasn't for broadband, I might believe the official story. So that the technology has evolved, where this was like, with the invention of movable type, led to the American Revolution and Thomas Paine being able to, in American history, Thomas Paine's work is probably the greatest bestseller of all time. It was all over the place. The internet is doing the same thing now. So the criminals are losing their ability to control public opinion, and they're having problems. And that will maybe prevent them from doing another 9/11. So even if we just prevent them from doing another 9/11, because now they're scared, what we have done will be worthwhile. That's sort
Mm-hmm.
of my take on it.
I like to believe that too. Again, you got to have faith that you're having an impact in this world, because sometimes you don't always see it. Sometimes you don't even find out about what you did until later, whether it has to do with 9/11 outreach or just some other thing. Maybe you gave some words of advice to a kid, and then that kid actually listened and and ended up doing well with it, but you don't find out until he's like 20. So you got to just do what you are doing. And a big part of it too is to let go of the fear. And I don't want to say not care, because that puts out the wrong message there, or it can be twisted around and misconstrued. Obviously you care about 9/11, but stop caring what they say about you, or any of the attacks or whatever. If you're getting attacked, you're doing something right. That's my opinion.
Yep.
And you just, if you have some inclination out there, I'd do it, except I'd be afraid I'd win. But run for office. Then I'd be stuck being a congressman. But
Go for it.
I just care about 9/11. We'll introduce the Bobby McIlvaine Act, and then I'll step down. But seriously, like, if you got an inclination out there and you feel you could do it, you can do a lot with just your cell phone these days. It's amazing. I think there was some candidate, and the show's been on so long I can't remember everybody's name, but some guy ran and he just used the Google Plus page. And I think he did pretty well. I think he won the primary or something, just running. So, like, give it a shot, and don't just rely on what somebody else did, because sometimes you can come up with something on your own, some kind of system or plan. Give it a shot and see what happens. If you got the time, you're freshly retired out there, you agree with our evidence here at AE 9/11 Truth, you want to support the Bobby McIlvaine Act, go knock on doors and talk to people. Put in that time, and that's really it. A lot of the victory comes from being willing to show up and put the work into doing whatever you got to do to get ahead. And I mean, someone can surprise us at some point. Now, we've got rules because we're a 501c3, so we can't endorse any particular candidate. But I'd be happy, just as a news item, to bring somebody on the show who says, hey, I'm running for Congress in this whatever district of whatever state, and just cover it as a news item. I can't tell people to vote for him in that area, but we can let people know that they exist. So could help out in that way. But, put yourself out there and don't worry about the naysayers, because honestly, I don't think this can hold. The way the media is, you tune into the media, it's like some kind of WWF show or wrestling match. I mean, the people almost, like, a lot of times are even wearing costumes. It's bizarre and crazy. And this is just so, it's so flimsy, in my opinion. This can't hold very longer. I think the truth is just going to spill through at some point, and people will just sort of generally acknowledge it, like when the Soviet Union fell.
Well, if you look at some of the ratings, and these numbers are rough, CNN used to have about 1 million viewers. In a country of 350 million, that's less than 1/3 of 1%. And since then, they've gone down to like half that, which makes the fact that they are on the White House press corps an absurdity that few people can ignore. This is part of the results that we have achieved. Like, I know people that I woke up, people I worked with, and one of the first things that they did after they figured this 9/11 stuff out is they disconnected from cable news. And a lot of people simply have stopped even listening to the crooks that are lying to us about almost everything. So that means that there's less advertising revenue going into the crooks, like CNN. And an example, I was getting on the subway. This is a Washington D.C. area, and it's like 6:30 in the morning or something. Some poor guy was passing out copies of the Washington Post for free. These are like shorter copies, not the whole paper. The Washington Post has been reduced to hiring like this poor guy to giving their papers away for free. That shows you how far down they've gone, that they are held in contempt by so many people. This is one of the results of what we've done. We are in a war of public relations, and like what you just said, when you're in a war of public relations, you don't get the kind of immediate feedback that you would get. Like, say for example, you're painting a room, you get immediate feedback. The room looks different. But with public relations, you might get some secondary, indirect feedback a time later. Well, the example is the candidate who won the White House in 2016 made enough people think that he was a truther that they voted for him. So things like that's just one example. The fact that Jeb Bush was booed at CPAC, things like that. So there's a number of people's whose the fact that people didn't sign up to get these free vaccines because they no longer trust the government, and enough legislators voted against the vaccine mandate. So at least in many parts of the country, people are not comfortable with government mandates of anything, vaccines or whatever, because the trust in the government has gone down. And this is what happens when you lie when you lie to enough people, and when enough people figure out that you've lied to them, you become like the boy who cried wolf. People won't even bother even listening to things the government says anymore. So that's kind of
Yeah, and I want to say about that, it's so funny because I was watching, the old Night of the Living Dead. It's a black and white movie with zombies, and one of the things, now obviously it's not a real situation, it's fictional, but one of the things I was thinking about during that, when they're saying, the governor's going to come on, and if these people, they didn't use the word camps, but they use like centers. We have centers set up for it, and I'm thinking, if that was a real situation, I would be hard pressed for going to the center, because I'd probably be thinking they had something to do with this happening in the first place. And it got me thinking about the fact is, like, if there is something going on, because real things do happen too, there's real there's real events that happen. Sometimes people just go nuts and do a mass shooting or whatever. But now, like, nobody can trust anything. And now the people on the other side of the 9/11, they will say it's because of you. You did that. You put this distrust in the public. Look, I know physics and common sense. I know the people out there on the internet who are making sense, and I know the ones who aren't. All right, I'm not going to just let go of the murder of 3,000 people because the government and NIST are lying about the cause of it. About one of the biggest components of why these buildings came down. I'm going to let that go just because of some future events and things like this. But this is a problem in our society, and on the other side of it too. You've seen people who just don't trust anything, to the point where they've gotten so open-minded their brains have fallen out, and everything is a conspiracy now. And so it's like we're trapped in the middle of sort of this big push and pull. And I think for the government, for members of Congress, if they really want to try to put things back together again, or at least take the first step in doing that, acknowledge the problems with the NIST report. Let's have a reinvestigation. Let's look at the things that architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth has brought up, and let's take it seriously. Let's, address the very real criticisms of this report. And I think that would take a big step towards people kind of going back to normalcy, whatever you define as normalcy. I don't know, 1989 or something. normalcy and maybe trusting a few more things, showing that you have that concern enough about the questions from very reputable people. We represent over 3,500 architects and engineers now, and that you're not just in cover-up mode, because it's causing problems on both sides. It's creating this lack of trust. I'm not creating the lack of trust. The 9/11 truth movement didn't start by me. All right, I didn't just hang a shingle on the internet of 9/11 free fall and do all of this. I mean, there were other people talking about this before I came here, right? So it would exist regardless, and it's because there are very legitimate concerns. So they're the ones who created this situation, not any particular individuals. Sorry, that's just a rant. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, when the German government told people to go to the concentration camps, people went voluntarily because they were told that they would be protected and fed and given shelter, and they believed it. Would Americans do that today? Some would. A lot of them wouldn't. So this is the power of the internet. When I was 11 years old when they shot President Kennedy, and back then the only information we knew was the major newspapers and the 3 TV networks. There was no alternative information. Now there is alternative information like your show, which is why I think in every war there's a central battle, a decisive battle, and I think we are in a war where the survival of our nation is at stake, and the central battle is going to be control over the censorship of the internet. If they are able to censor the internet completely, that will be the end. That's why the First Amendment is the First Amendment. And they are attacking the First Amendment, all the amendments every day. And we cannot let that happen. And Napoleon said, the pen is mightier than the sword. We have to use the pen. I hope we never have to use the sword, because when that happens, a lot of innocent people get killed. So why we still have the pen? Let's use it. And this is what every American citizen has to do. You have to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and save your country, because your country is under attack, big time.
And those are the words to end it with. And I think 9/11 Truth is the Achilles heel of these people. So do what you can. Help John out at CPAC, or if you don't want to go hang out at CPAC, you're on the left, go to the left forum. But just bring this evidence to as many people as you can. You all know what you're doing here after 20 years. So, keep it up. John, keep up the great work. And you really should have your own show, because I can totally see this. And you got the blue screen. We can put a nice backdrop, DC or whatever behind it. But please consider that. But thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Free Fall today.
Well, thank you.